It happened on the third day of a 4-day trek through the northern Sierra Nevada. One of those trails that seemed to string together every shade of pine and granite the mountains could muster. There were 5 of us: me, Kyle, Sam, Jesse and Erin. We'd all done our share of hiking, but this was the first time we tried something this long together. Spirits were high that morning as the sun burned the frost from the meadow grass. The packs bit into our shoulders the way they always do after 2 days, but no one complained. We were in that good rhythm you fall into when the world is quiet and every breath feels earned. Around mid-afternoon, the air shifted, thickened somehow, like the woods were holding their breath. We were moving along a rocky descent toward a creek crossing when I heard it. A sharp gasp, a slide of gravel, then a cry that made the birds explode from the trees. Erin was down. When I got to her, she was sitting against the boulder, pale, her left ankle twisted at an angle that made my stomach lurch. She tried to stand, but couldn't put weight on it. The silence that followed was heavy. 5 miles to the nearest trailhead. No cell signal. Daylight starting to fade. I remember the scent of dust and pine needles mingling with the faint metallic tang of panic. Kyle knelt beside her, assessing the swelling. Sam was already digging through his pack for the first aid kit. Jesse looked from face to face, trying to find someone to say what we were all thinking. We had a real problem. We took stock of what we had: gauze, tape, a bit of elastic bandage, 2 sturdy trekking poles, and plenty of paracord. I could feel the weight of leadership settling on me, not because I wanted it, but because someone had to keep things from tipping into chaos. I suggested we make a splint and redistribute her gear among us. Erin nodded through tears, biting her lip hard enough to leave marks. The next hour blurred into work, gathering straight sticks, wrapping the ankle as gently as we could, tying and retying until the makeshift brace held firm. The sun slid lower, staining the ridgeline gold. Every sound seemed sharper. The thump of our packs on the ground. His shoulders hunched under the doubled weight, sweat darkening his shirt. The sun was dropping fast, the light turning bronze and long through the trees, the kind that makes you aware of how little time you have before dark. We paused often, partly for Erin's sake, partly to think. There was an unspoken rhythm in how we worked. Someone checking the bandage, someone filling water bottles, someone keeping spirits up with nervous jokes. The earlier ease of the trip was gone, replaced by a quiet focus. Every decision mattered now. When you're out there, far from help, you learn that leadership isn't about giving orders. It's about listening to fear without letting it steer you. At one break, Sam squatted beside me and muttered, "We're not making it to the trailhead tonight." He was right. We had maybe 2 miles of daylight left in us and 3 more of trail. I looked at Erin, her jaw tight but her eyes steady. She knew it too. I nodded. "We'll stop at the creek. It's level ground and we'll have water." Saying it out loud seemed to settle everyone. When we reached the creek, dusk was already gathering in the hollows. We set down our packs and got to work without a word. Kyle cleared a flat spot for tents. Jesse gathered wood, and I filled the pot for boiling water. Erin sat nearby, her foot propped on a rock, watching us with a mix of frustration and gratitude. I could see she hated feeling like a burden. I remember crouching beside her, handing her my jacket and saying, "You're still part of this team. You just get the easy job tonight. Supervisor." She laughed, a quiet sound in the growing dark, and it lifted everyone's mood. When the fire finally caught, its orange light washed over our tired faces. The woods felt different now. closer, almost protective. We ate in near silence, each lost in thought, the flames snapping softly. The reality of our situation was sinking in. No one said it outright, but we all knew tomorrow would be the real test. That night, I lay awake listening to the creek and the low wind moving through the pines, stretched and damp from dew. We had to move soon or risk it stiffening too much for her to bear weight. Breakfast was quick, oatmeal thick with powdered milk and instant coffee that tasted faintly of smoke. Nobody complained. There wasn't room for complaints anymore. While Kyle boiled more water to clean the bandages, I repacked our gear. We redistributed what was left of Erin's load again, each of us taking something extra. Jessie tied her foam pad to the outside of my pack. Sam carried both tents, and Kyle, the strongest of us, slung the bear canister over his shoulder like it was nothing. When we were done, our camp looked like it had never existed. Just a circle of pressed grass by the creek, and a few fading footprints leading back to the trail. Erin tested her footing with the aid of 2 trekking poles we'd lashed together for better leverage. Her face tightened with each step, but she didn't complain once. That kind of quiet grit is what keeps groups like ours moving when panic could just as easily take over. We started again, slow but steady. The trail wound upward now, tracing the contour of the valley. Every switchback felt like a mile. Every patch of sunlight, a small victory. We stopped often. Each time Kyle checked her ankle and adjusted the bandages. Sam kept watch on the map, measuring our progress against the ridgeline ahead. Jessie and I took turns walking ahead and clearing small obstacles. The rhythm became mechanical. Walk, pause, encourage, repeat. But beneath it all was something deeper. A wordless understanding that we were past frustration, past fear. Now it was simply endurance. By midday, clouds began to pile up in the west, thick grey masses that promised rain. The wind picked up, scattering pine needles across the path. We reached a clearing just as the first drops began to fall, fat and cold. It wasn't a storm yet, but it would be soon. I scanned the tree line and spotted an old fire ring, probably left by hunters years ago. We needed shelter fast. I called out to the others and we set to work again. Kyle and I rigged a tarp between 2 weight of water, and every so often one of us would lift a corner to spill the pooled rain onto the ground. Lightning flashed behind the trees, white and sharp, followed by the slow roll of thunder echoing down the valley. It was the kind of noise that humbles you, reminds you how small you really are out there. We took turns keeping the fire alive, crouched over it like guards at a gate. The smoke clung to our hair and clothes, burning our eyes. But none of us complained. Even that tiny flame, sputtering under the tarp's edge, was enough to keep hope alive. Erin was pale but alert, her ankle wrapped tight and resting on a rolled-up jacket. Kyle handed her his spare wool hat, and she smiled weakly, murmuring a thank you. You could see how much that small gesture mattered. At some point, the worst of the rain eased, fading into a steady drizzle. The forest exhaled, the sound of dripping branches, the wet hiss of pine needles underfoot. We emerged from under the tarp, blinking at the light returning through the clouds. Mist hung low between the trees, and everything smelled clean and wild, like the earth had just been washed and renewed. We decided to move again before our muscles stiffened. The ground was slick, the rocks shining like glass, but the air had cooled and it felt good to walk. Erin leaned heavier on us now, every few steps biting her lip against the pain. yet she never asked to stop. That stubborn spark in her eyes told me she'd crawl if she had to. By late afternoon, we reached a rise overlooking the valley, a narrow shelf where the trail curved around a granite outcrop. From there, we could see the faint thread of the river below, and, far beyond, the line of the access road glinting like a promise. We were close, maybe a mile or two, but that mile looked endless. We paused to rest. Jessie pulled a chocolate bar from her pocket, broke it into pieces and passed it around. Nobody spoke much. Words felt unnecessary. We'd been through something that stripped us down to the basics: pain, endurance, and a kind of quiet trust that didn't need to be said out loud. Then the sun began to set. You finally let yourself believe you're going to make it. The trail widened as we descended, the forest thinning into scrub and gravel. Erin was leaning between Carl and me now, her breath coming in quick bursts, but she never asked to stop. Behind us, Jessie and Sam carried the last of the gear, trading quiet words about how good a hot meal was going to taste. When we rounded the final bend, the trees opened up, and there it was, the trailhead sign, weathered and chipped, but more beautiful than anything I'd seen all trip. A pickup truck was parked nearby, dust still settling around its tires. A pair of older hikers stood by the tailgate sorting gear, and when they saw us emerge, mud-caked, limping, half-soaked, they hurried over. "Everything all right?" one of them asked, already setting down his water bottle. I explained quickly, voice rough from fatigue. They didn't hesitate. Within minutes we had Erin seated on a blanket in the back of their truck, her foot elevated, wrapped snug in dry fabric. They offered us coffee from a thermos that might as well have been liquid gold. The warmth hit like sunlight through cloud. As we waited for the ranger they'd radioed, the 5 of us sat in the dirt, leaning against the truck, staring at the mountains we'd just come from. It looked peaceful from there. Blue ridges fading into evening haze. Hard to believe how harsh it had felt up close. The others were quiet, lost in their own thoughts. I caught Kyle watching Erin, his expression a mix of pride and worry. Jessie was laughing softly at something Sam said, her eyes rimmed with fatigue but bright. We'd seen the best and worst of each other over those 2 days, and somehow it had brought us closer than any number of easy hikes ever could. When the ranger arrived, he checked Erin's ankle and assured us we'd done a good job with the splint. He said it was probably a bad sprain, maybe a small fracture, but nothing life-threatening. Relief washed through the group like a tide. Soon after, the others helped load the packs into the bed of the truck, while I lingered by the sign, tracing the worn letters with a finger. The woods were quiet again, the kind of quiet that follows effort, not emptiness. I realized how strange it felt when there's no one else to rely on but each other. That night, back in town, as we sat around a diner table still wearing our trail dirt like a badge, someone said softly, "We should do another trip next year." We all groaned, laughed and nodded anyway, because that's what the wilderness does. It breaks you a little, then builds you back stronger, one hard mile at a time.